Hello everyone, it's Meg. It is that time once again for another mega build in creative, and the time lapse to go with it, of course. I've been taking my time with this one and working on it over a period of several months, and it's finally done, so I hope you enjoy it. This whole build started just because I wanted to do a fairy type build, and a build that included lots of flowers, so that's basically all this build is. It's a lot of fairies and flowers. Considering I started it last fall, I'm very fortunate to have finished it around spring, so perfect timing. Well, starting off the build, I'm just kind of building up some of the larger assets. I didn't really have a plan on how the composition was going to look exactly. I was just starting to build a bunch of assets and then I kind of pieced them together later on. So starting off, I am building a giant hummingbird that will have a fairy riding it eventually, and I think I did a good job with the texturing. I'm so thankful for all the extra blocks we have in 1.16. That made the texturing for this so much easier, especially with all the extra teal blocks and the purple-ish blocks with the crimson wood, so that was really helpful for this build. And because it is going to be ridden, I had to kind of make up a saddle of some kind to go on it. I don't know if it makes much sense, but it's a fantasy build, so anything goes. I find it easier whenever you're doing two organics that are interacting with each other to completely texture and finish off one before doing the other, because then you don't have to worry about the texturing and details underneath the other organic, if that makes sense. So once the hummingbird was completely done, I did the little fairy that was riding it, and I didn't color her yet because I just wanted to get a feel for all of my assets before going too much into coloring. So after I built her, I did some extra mushrooms. I kept changing the way I did the mushrooms because I was learning new ways and faster ways of doing it. So you'll see me do those in several different methods, and I wanted to have a fairy sitting on this mushroom too, so I went ahead and made a model of that. And this one's going to be a little different. She's going to have some beautiful butterfly wings. She is the monarch, the queen of all the fairies, so of course she's going to have beautiful monarch wings when we get around to coloring her. So I continued modeling the fairies. Again, I didn't color any of them just yet. I wanted to get a feel for the scale of how they all fit together so that I could resize them and reposition them and just figure out if they were all just gonna look good. Now I have my three fairy assets all built, but I need to position them into some sort of composition. So I made a really simple base using Go Brush and kept it at this blindingly bright color so that I could drive myself crazy in the many hours of building to come. Now that I have a better idea of how this will look, time to go back and texture all the fairies. Of course, we have the little one who is riding the hummingbird. Perhaps she's delivering some important message, or she's just going for a joyride. I do not know, but she's rather adorable. Next we have my favorite, which is the Monarch Fairy. She is, of course, the queen of this realm, even though she does not have a crown, but she is just calmly overlooking the scenery and just enjoying her time in the forest. And I do believe her wings are probably one of my favorite parts of this build, although it's really hard to choose a favorite part because later on I do build some things I liked equally as well. And then, of course, we have our third fairy who will not have blue skin, but she will have green wings, which I thought was a very unique thing to try, and I think they turned out rather nice. It was really an excuse for me to try using slime blocks in a build, because I've never done that before. In fact, there was a lot of blocks in this build that I've never done in a mega build before, so it was really fun to see what unique blocks I could incorporate. And adding some final touches to her, she is doing her part to infest this beautiful flower forest with dandelion seeds. Now time to actually build the flower forest itself, and this it took probably the longest amount of time to do. I'm starting with the largest flowers, working my way down to smaller ones to make sure I have room for everything I want, even though I have no clue what I want. We're going to start with a custom daylily, kind of my own design of one. And this is actually going as high as block height, which is 256 here. I think it hits block height. If it doesn't, it's only a couple blocks short of it. That gives you an idea of how tall this build is. I had to use the loft tool to create each individual petal, and I used different colors to help me see the different widths so I could make sure they were all somewhat consistent. And once I was happy with that, then I could color it, and I was actually really pleased with the coloring on this. And I'm surprised it didn't take me as long as I thought it would. I just kind of breezed through it, and it turned out amazing. Maybe it's just the fact that we have a lot of nice yellow blocks to work with, which definitely does make it easier, and I don't have to think as much about which blocks to use. I'm focusing on just building flowers now, so I'm going to build a cone flower next. I did this process of just doing the flowers themselves and then adding in the leaves later. That way I could just use the leaves as a filler and they wouldn't be interfering with wherever I wanted to put a new flower. So I didn't really finish each flower until I had built all of the flowers, if that makes sense. And to continue building the flowers, we added a few little bell flowers that are hanging behind the Monarch Fairy. And I attempted to do some snapdragons in the back, and I know they look nothing like snapdragons. They do not have the correct flower shape. But if you've ever seen a snapdragon flower, they are extremely detailed, and I was not about to build all of those by hand, which I think was the only way I could have done it to where it looked good. So I simplified it and made up my own shape, but I still called it a snapdragon. Time to take a break from these giant flowers and build some smaller things like an adorable bumblebee flying right above the cone flower. And also some extra mushrooms. Time to start adding more of those because that was always the intent. I just wanted to get some of the bigger stuff out of the way before doing those. And I eventually did find that the easiest way to do mushrooms is to do the top first, using the revolve command, and then rotating it, and then building the stem. That was ultimately the fastest and easiest way to make a nice mushroom. For anyone who doesn't know, I did live stream the majority of this process on Twitch, and I did have some people give suggestions for things I could add, and I did like the idea of adding a frog or some other kind of creature. Some of them probably wouldn't have been a good fit in this build just because of the scale, but I decided to try the frog, and I am very glad I did. It was actually a lot harder to shape than I thought. I've never ever studied the shape of a frog before, but it's very, very interesting. And now I kind of understand it a little bit better after struggling with this frog for a couple hours. After a couple hours of shaping, it's time for a couple more hours of coloring. And I think all that coloring was worth it because he turned out so cute. I think he is now my favorite part of this build. And in case you're wondering, by popular vote, his name is Pog the Frog. I know some will appreciate me saying it in the video, so there you go. And now I feel like I'm on the home stretch of this build where I can just fill in all the gaps and spaces to get all the details. So first we're going to finish off all the extra mushrooms, this time a different type of mushroom, but the same process. Very, very simple to do, just a little bit time consuming. Then to add some pansies. They are one of my favorite flowers, I do believe. I just love how adorable they are and the little faces that they look like they have on them. And finally, we can start filling in all the gaps with leaves. So I'm going to start with the larger plants first again, since I know some of those leaves will take up the most space, and then we'll work our way down to the smaller plants. I tried my best to make certain green blocks more prominent in certain plants so that they weren't blending in too much with each other. I was coming to the realization that there isn't tons of green blocks to go around, but I think I managed to pull it off where they all stand apart well enough where they don't just look like the same type of plants all mixed together. I had a lot of extra space to fill and I really didn't know what to fill it with. So I tried building what is supposed to look like phlox, P-H-L-O-X, but I don't know if I pulled it off very well. It doesn't really matter if it looks exactly like that plant, it's just a ground cover that is covered with flowers, and I just filled that in on all the little gaps that I felt like it needed it, as well as some boulders. I threw in a few rocks and boulders too. So I added more things like that to make the build look more dense, and then it was done. I calculated all the times in my replay files, and it was at least 44 hours of building. But I know it was more than that because there were times I was building where I wasn't recording at all. but that gives you an idea of how long this took me to build. Even though it took a long time, to me it's worth it because I just love seeing the end result and seeing something that I've made, and to me it's just a work of art, which is how I like to treat a lot of these things I build in Minecraft. Minecraft is basically my 3D art studio, and I am trying to learn actual 3D, but I do like seeing it come together in Minecraft, and it just has a completely different feel to it, and it's a completely different sense of accomplishment, so I really enjoy doing this kind of stuff in Minecraft. Even though at times it can drive me insane, it is well worth it in the end, and you get to see these awesome time lapses because of it. And of course I will have a render I did of it too at the end, but with all that said, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in another one someday.